Hi, this is Matt. This is Mental Model Monday number 25. Today we're going to talk about the Transtheoretical Model. The Transtheoretical Model is a model of behavior change, and it came about initially when this guy, James Prochaska, was thinking about all these different psychological interventions. And it seemed like no matter how many times you tested them and tried to figure out their efficacy, no intervention was better than any other intervention. They all had roughly the same effects. And it seemed to him like that shouldn't be the case because they're very different, and so they should have different effects. And the hypothesis that James came up with was that different interventions were good at different stages. And you weren't seeing some be more effective than others, some be less effective than others, because some are more effective and some are less effective at different stages. But on average, the way that studies were done, that was sort of just a wash. So James Prochaska came up with a theory about different stages of change, and this was based on sort of interviewing people, trying to identify these different stages. And he came up with 5 different stages of change. He then categorized all the different interventions you could do to create this change into 10 different processes of change, as different from consciousness raising, which is like getting the fact, is from using rewards, which is reinforcement management, is from stimulus control, which is sort of like managing your environment. And what they did was they tried to change. Do they match up these processes of change with the stages of change? At first, he couldn't find anything, but then he looked at people who had made the change the first time, who on their first go through were able to make the change and maintain it. And what they found was that there were actually matches between the stages and the processes used. They also found this interesting thing about decisional balance, where the pros and cons shifted over the different stages, but we're not going to go into that. What we'll go over today is the processes of change and how they match with the stages. The negatives of the current thing, the positives of possible future reality. Another one is helping them notice the effect on others. So look at their environment and see how they're actually affecting others with their behavior. And then the final one, which is sort of the opposite of that, is social liberation. Noticing the positives, noticing the powerful things in society that can help you change and they can want to help you change. And at this stage, the cons of changing outweigh the pro. Now, once you go through pre-contemplation, you get to contemplation. This is when you start thinking about, maybe I do need to change. So the processes of change that work here are the same ones as in the last one, except there's one important one, probably one of the most important ones that you add in the contemplation stage, which is self-reevaluation, changing your self-image to be in line more with the new change that you want to make versus the old person who had not changed. And that's when you make that shift is really when you start going from contemplation to preparation. You start actually planning out your change. The preparation stage is the shortest stage of all these. All these last usually months. Preparation lasts only weeks. And in preparation, you're going to continue to do that self-reevaluation, but you're also going to bring in counter conditioning. You're going to figure out what substitutes can you use for your current behavior. You're going to bring in helping relationships. You're going to bring in people to support you in your change, and you're going to bring in self-liberation. In self-liberation, you actually make a commitment to the change. Commitment as opposed to a hope or a wish or a decision that you can change. You're committing to change in preparation. And commitment is probably the most important. In this stage, commitment is probably the most important of the change strategies. After that action, you're actually bringing the change into practice. So this is where counter conditioning really comes in. You keep using counter conditioning, and again, you're substituting old triggers for new triggers, bad habits for different habits. So it's important here, whatever you're changing, you're not just getting rid of the old thing, you're substituting it with some new thing, hopefully that meets the same needs as the old thing or similar needs. You're continuing to use those helping relationships, and you're continuing to recommit, to make that commitment. At this point, the pros of changing better outweigh the cons, or you're in big trouble. And finally, you have maintenance. So you've sort of made the change, and here you need to manage your reinforcement. You're going to be using rewards to keep rewarding you for good behavior. This actually, I believe, should also be in action. I might have made a mistake there when I set this up. And you have stimulus control, where you're managing your environment here. You're making sure that you won't get re-triggered and relapse. So that was a whirlwind throughput of the stages of change, but like, how do I actually use this in my life? So how I use this is just thinking about, am I ready to make a change? First of all, I don't force myself to jump to action in a thing. I think, am I really ready to make this change? I don't do this thing where, like, change happens in an instant. Tomorrow I'm gonna start running. I really think about the stage of change, and I let myself go through them. And the strategies I use at each stage matter. For instance, this is a Pavlok. This will shock me when I do a negative behavior, a behavior that I want to change. If I use this and I'm still in the pre-contemplation or contemplation stage, I haven't committed yet, through which happens in the preparation stage, then what will happen is I just won't press the button and shock myself when I do the behavior. However, if I've gotten to preparation, I've gotten through preparation, I feel an internal felt sense of commitment, and I'm in action. This is a very, very powerful tool because it changes my incentives. Because I know I'm going to do it. I've committed to doing this new behavior. I know I'm going to press the button. So now I have an additional incentive to not do that old behavior, the behavior that I want to change. Now I should mention that the most meta-studies of the stages of change have come out negative. There are some positive meta-studies that show that the stages of change in the Transtheoretical Model works, but there are an overwhelming amount of meta-studies which say there's not really a positive or negative to matching stages to strategies. So why am I teaching this to you, and why do I still think about this? It's because I do think there is some truth there. When you do these large studies, these large meta studies, there are confounders. There are large systems, and this idea might only be a small part in that large system, and it might even be overshadowed by other things, by other models. But I think if using this model as a lens, combined with many of those other models, will get you closer to the truth than if you didn't have that model. In other words, I think this is useful, even though it's not true. And we know all models are false, some are useful. This is one of those. So, start playing around with the stages of change. Think about, in the things you're trying to change in yourself, where are you in the stages of change? What are your strategies of change in that stage? And are you rushing yourself? Have you rushed yourself in the past? And how has that affected you? Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll catch you on the flip side.